The wind howled across the desolate Wyoming plains, kicking up dust that stung Marcus Tate's face as he crouched. The generator's roar was deafening, a low, guttural rumble that made the ground itself seem to tremble. It was the only sound in the vast, snow-dusted expanse of the Black Hills Energy Co-op, a remote facility where the nearest town was a 2-hour drive through unforgiving terrain. Marcus, a wiry man with calloused hands and a 5 o'clock shadow that never quite left, knelt beside the massive machine, his breath visible in the frigid air. His toolbox lay open beside him, tools scattered like a child's toys, but his focus was razor-sharp. The generator was the lifeblood of the co-op, powering the small community of workers' barracks, and it had been sputtering for days. Now, it was dead, and the pressure was on. Marcus wasn't just any mechanic. He was a single dad, raising his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, in a place most would call nowhere. The co-op wasn't just his job, it was their home, a cluster of modular buildings nestled against a backdrop of jagged hills. Lily was back at the barracks, probably curled up with one of her books, waiting for him to get the lights back on. He'd promised her they'd watch a movie tonight, a rare treat. But the generator, a hulking, diesel-fueled beaster, had other plans. Its alternator was shot, and the backup system was barely holding. Marcus had been at it for hours, his fingers numb from the cold, his patience thinner than the ice on the nearby creek. The door to the generator shed slammed open, and in strode Vanessa Caldwell, CEO of Black Hills Energy Co-op, her tailored coat flapping like a cape. Her presence was a jolt, like a spark in a dry field. She was all city polisher, sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, and a confidence that filled the room like heat. Behind her trailed her team, a half-dozen suits from the Denver office, their faces pinched against the cold, their briefcases clutched like shields. Vanessa's boots clicked on the concrete floor, each step a declaration. She wasn't here to check on progress, she was here to make a point. "Mr. Date," she said, her voice cutting through the generator's dying hum, "why isn't this fixed yet?" Her tone wasn't cruel, but it was firm, like a teacher addressing a student who'd forgotten his homework. The suits behind her shifted, their eyes darting between Marcus and their boss. They weren't used to this place, its grit and isolation. They were here for the annual inspection, and Vanessa was clearly in no mood for delays. Marcus stood, wiping grease from his hands onto his jeans. "Alternator's fried, Mom. I've got a workaround, but it's temporary. Need a new one shipped in, and that'll take a week, minimum." He met her gaze, unflinching. He'd dealt with suits before, people who thought they could manage a place like this from a corner office. Vanessa was different, though. She'd been out here before, walked the lines, knew the stakes. Still, she had a reputation for results, not excuses. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of calculation in them. "A week. We'll be icicles by then." "You're the best we've got, Marcus. Fix it now." The words hung in the air, and the suits exchanged glances, sensing a showdown. Vanessa crossed her arms, her posture daring him to argue. The team behind her was silent, but their presence amplified the challenge. This wasn't just about the generator, it was about her authority, her ability to keep this operation running in front of her corporate entourage. Marcus felt a spark of irritation. He wasn't some rookie, he'd kept this place humming through worse than a busted alternator. But her tone, the audience ear, it stung. "With respect, Miss Caldwell, I'm not a magician. I can patch it, but it's not a snap of the fingers." He gestured to the generator, its innards exposed like a patient on an operating table. "Unless you've got a spare alternator in your briefcase, we're working with what we've got." A murmur rippled through the suits, but Vanessa didn't flinch. If anything, her lips twitched, like she was enjoying the pushback. "Then show me what you've got, Mr. Date. Walk us through it." It wasn't a request. She stepped closer, her team fanning out behind her, their polished shoes absurd against the shed's grimy floor. Marcus caught a whiff of her perfume, something crisp, expensive, out of place here. He didn't like being put on the spot, but he wasn't about to back down. Not with Lily waiting, not with the whole co-op depending on him. He crouched back down, pointing at the generator's components. "Alternators here," he said, Tapping the cylindrical housing converts mechanical energy to electrical. This one's burnt out or overloaded from last week's storm. I've rerouted power through the secondary system, but it's not built for heavy loads. I can bypass the alternator with a jury-rigged setup, but it's a band-aid. We'll get maybe 48 hours before it overheats. He kept his voice steady, professional, but there was an edge to it. He wasn't here to impress her team. He was here to keep the lights on. Vanessa leaned in, her eyes scanning the machine like she could read its secrets. "And if it overheats?" she asked, her voice low but pointed. "We're dark. No heat, no water pumps." People start getting creative with campfires. Marcus stood again, meeting her gaze. He wasn't trying to be dramatic, it was just the truth. Out here, power wasn't a luxury, it was survival. One of the suits, a guy with glasses too big for his face, piped up. "Can't we expedite the shipment? Surely there's a supplier." Marcus cut him off. "Closest suppliers in Cheyenne. Weather's slowing deliveries. I've already called in favors." He didn't add that he'd been up half the night coordinating with suppliers, or that he'd promised Lily he'd be home by dinner. The suits didn't need his life story. Vanessa held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Fix it, Marcus. Get it running by tonight, and I'll kiss you right here in front of my team." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the suits, but her face was dead serious, her eyes locked on his. It was a dare, a spark thrown into dry grass. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, not sure if she was mocking him or testing him. Either way, it lit a fire. He snorted, shaking his head. "No offense, Miss Caldwell, but I'd rather have a new alternator." The suits chuckled again, but Vanessa's smile was sharp, like she'd expected the deflection. She didn't push it, but the air crackled with the challenge. She turned to her team, gesturing for them to follow her out. "Get it done, Mr. Date," she called over her shoulder, and then she was gone, her team trailing like ducklings. Marcus exhaled. The shed is suddenly quieter without her presence. He didn't have time to dwell on her words or the way her eyes had held his a beat too long. Lily was waiting, and the generator wasn't going to fix itself. He dove back into the machine, his mind racing. Vanessa's challenge wasn't just about the kiss, it was about proving he could deliver under pressure. He'd been doing that his whole life, but this felt different, personal. The next few hours were a blur of wrenches and wire. Marcus worked by the light of a headlamp as the sun dipped below the hills, casting the shed in shadows. The bypass was tricky, routing power through a system not meant to handle it was like threading a needle in a windstorm. He stripped wires, rerouted circuits, and tested connections, his fingers stiff from the cold. Every few minutes, he thought of Lily, probably reading by flashlight now, and of Vanessa's dare, which he shoved to the back of his mind. He didn't need the distraction, but it lingered like a stubborn ember. By 8 p.m., the generator was ready for a test. Marcus wiped his hands, his heart pounding as he flipped the switch. The machine groaned, then roared to life, its hum steady and strong. Lights flickered on across the co-op, a faint cheer echoing from the barracks. He'd done it. For now, at least, they had power. He trudged back to the main building, exhaustion settling into his bones. Lily was waiting in their small apartment, her face lighting up when he walked in. "You did it, Dad," she said, throwing her arms around him. He hugged her back, the weight of the day lifting slightly. But as he sank onto the couch, the door swung open again. Vanessa stood there, alone this time, her coat dusted with snow. The suits were gone, probably warming their hands by a heater somewhere. She stepped inside, her expression softer now, less like a CEO and more like someone who just remembered what it was like to be human. "You pulled it off," she said, her voice quieter, almost warm. "Nice work." Marcus shrugged, too tired to gloat. "Told you I'd get it done." She crossed the room, stopping just close enough for him to catch that crisp perfume again. "I keep my promises," she said, and before he could respond, she leaned in and kissed him. It was quick, firm, not romantic but not unkind either, like a handshake with more weight. Lily's eyes went wide from the couch, a grin spreading across her face. Marcus pulled back, His face warmed despite the cold. "Didn't think you were serious," he muttered. Vanessa smirked. "I'm always serious, Marcus. Good night." She turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her. The next morning, the co-op buzzed with a different energy. The generator's steady hum was a quiet victory, but Marcus felt the weight of Vanessa's visit lingering. The kiss had been a spark, nothing more, but it had shifted something. Lily wouldn't stop teasing him over breakfast, her giggles filling their small kitchen. "Dad, you're famous now," she said, her eyes bright with mischief. Marcus just shook his head, sipping his coffee, trying to focus on the day ahead. Vanessa was still around, her team prepping for their return to Denver. Marcus caught glimpses of her through the morning, reviewing reports, barking orders, her presence like a storm front. By noon, she found him again, this time in the maintenance yard, checking a backup fuel line. She was alone, her coat swapped for a heavy parka, her breath visible in the crisp air. "Generators still running," she said, her tone less sharp than yesterday. "You saved our asses." "Just doing my job," Marcus replied, not looking up from the fuel line. He wasn't sure what to make of her now. The kiss had been a stunt, a power play, but there was something else in her eyes today I respect. Maybe. She stepped closer, her boots crunching on the gravel. "You're good at it." "Better than good. I'm putting in a rush order for that alternator. Should be here in 3 days." She paused, like she was weighing her next words. "And I meant what I said last night. You're the kind of person this place needs." Marcus straightened, wiping his hands. "Appreciate it. But I'm just here for Lily and the folks who rely on this place." He wasn't fishing for praise, it was the truth. The co-op wasn't just a job, it was their lifeline. Vanessa nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I get it. I've got people depending on me too. This place here, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet." For the first time, she sounded like she belonged here, not in some high-rise office. She turned to him, her expression softer. "If you ever need anything, Marcus, you let me know." "You've earned that." He met her gaze, seeing the woman behind the title. "I'll keep that in mind." Mza. The wind tore across the Wyoming plains like a living thing, clawing at Marcus Tate's weathered jacket as he knelt beside the generator. Its roar filled the shed, a deep, mechanical pulse that seemed to shake the frozen ground beneath him. The Black Hills Energy Co-op was a speck in the vast emptiness, miles from anything resembling civilization, and this machine was its heart. Marcus's hands, rough and stained with grease, moved with practiced precision, though the cold bit at his knuckles, turning them red and stiff. He'd been at it for hours, wrestling with the generator's failing alternator, the weight of the task heavier than the toolbox at his side. This wasn't just about keeping the lights on for the co-op's small crew, why, it was about keeping his daughter, Lily, warm and safe in their barracks apartment. Marcus was no stranger to pressure. A single dad at 35, he'd learned to carry burdens earlier, first as a young father, now as the co-op's lead mechanic. Lily, 10 years old and sharp as a tack, was probably curled up with a book under a blanket, waiting for him to make good on his promise of a movie night. The thought of her kept him focused, even as the generator groaned. Its alternator burned out from last week's storm. The backup system was limping along, but it wasn't built for the full load. Time was tight, and the stakes were higher. Without power, the co-op's heaters, water pumps, and kitchen would grind to a halt. The shed's metal door banged open, letting in a gust of icy air, and Vanessa Caldwell, the CEO of Black Hills Energy Co-op. She strode in like she owned the wind itself, her tailored coat flapping, her dark hair pulled back tight. Behind her trailed her team of 6 corporate types from Denver, their faces pinched against the cold, clutching briefcases like they were life rafts. Vanessa's presence was electric, her sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes commanding the room. She wasn't just here to check on the generator, she was here to make a statement. The suits behind her were her audience, and Marcus was center stage. "Mr. Date," she said, her voice slicing through the generator's rumble, "why isn't this fixed yet?" Her tone wasn't cruel, but it carried an edge, like a whip cracked just close enough to sting. The suits shifted uncomfortably, their polished shoes absurd against the shed's concrete floor. streaked with oil and dirt. They were here for the annual inspection, but Vanessa was clearly in no mood for delays. Her authority filled the space, as tangible as the cold. Marcus stood, wiping his hands on his jeans, his jaw tight. He wasn't intimidated, he'd faced down worse than corporate typers, but her tone grated. Alternators shot, Miss Caldwell. I've got a temporary bypass in place, but it's not a long-term fix. New ones a week out. Best case. He met her gaze, his hazel eyes steady. He'd dealt with plenty of suits who thought they could run a place like this from a glass tower. Vanessa was different. She'd been out here before, walked the power lines, knew the stakes. But she was still the boss, and she was making that clear. Her eyes narrowed, a glint of calculation in them. A week. We'll freeze solid by then. You're the best we've got, Marcus. Fix it now. The words landed like a gauntlet thrown down, and the suits exchanged glances, sensing a showdown. Vanessa crossed her arms, her posture daring him to push back. This wasn't just about the generator, it was about her proving she could keep this operation running, right in front of her team. Marcus felt a spark of irritation. He wasn't some greenhorn. He'd kept this co-op alive through blizzards, fuel shortages, and worse. But her tone, the audience here, would hit a nerve. With respect, Miss Caldwell, I'm not a miracle worker. I can patch it, but it's not instant. Unless you've got a spare alternator in one of those briefcases, we're working with what we've got. He gestured to the generator, its guts exposed like a dissected animal. The suit stirred, but Vanessa's lips twitched, like she relished the challenge. Show me, she said, stepping closer, her team fanning out behind her. Walk us through it. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Her boots clicked on the concrete, each step deliberate, her presence filling the shed like heat. Marcus caught a hint of her perfume, crisp and out of place in the oil-soaked air. He didn't like being put on display, but he wasn't about to fold. Not with Lily waiting, not with the whole co-op counting on him. He crouched beside the generator, pointing at its components. Alternators here, he said, tapping the cylindrical housing. Converts mechanical energy to electrical. This one's to overloaded during the storm. I've rerouted power through the secondary system, but it's not meant for heavy loads. I can bypass the alternator with a jury-rigged setup, but it's a short-term fix. Maybe 48 hours before it overheats. His voice was steady, professional, but there was an edge to it. He wasn't here to impress her team. He was here to keep the co-op alive. Vanessa leaned in, her eyes scanning the machine like she could decipher its secrets. And if it overheats? She asked, her voice low, pointed. We're dark. No heat, no water, no nothing. People start burning furniture to stay warm. Marcus stood, meeting her gaze. He wasn't being dramatic out here. Power was survival. The co-op was a lifeline for the 30-odd workers and their families, including him and Lily. One of the suits, a guy with glasses too big for his face, spoke up. Can't we expedite the shipment? Surely there's a supplier. Marcus cut him off. Closest suppliers in Cheyenne. Weather's slowing deliveries. I've already called in every favor I've got. He didn't mention he'd been up half the night on the phone with suppliers, or that he'd promised Lily he'd be home for dinner. The suits didn't need his life story. Vanessa held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, she said, fix it by tonight, Marcus, and I'll kiss you right here in front of my team. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the suits, but her face was dead serious. Her eyes locked on his. It was a dare, a spark in a dry field. Marcus felt his jaw clench, unsure if she was mocking him or testing him. Either way, it lit something in him. He snorted, shaking his head. No offense, Miss Caldwell, but I'd rather have that alternator. The suits chuckled, but Vanessa's smile was sharper. She'd expected the deflection. She turned to her team, gesturing for them to follow her out. Get it done, Mr. Date, she called over her shoulder, and then she was gone, the door slamming shut behind her. The shed went quiet, save for the generator's rumble. Marcus exhaled, his breath fogging in the cold air. He didn't have time to dwell on her words or the way her eyes had held his a beat too long. Lily was waiting, and the generator wasn't going to fix itself. He dove back into the machine, his mind racing. Vanessa's challenge wasn't just about the kisser, it was about proving he could deliver under pressure. He'd been doing that his whole life, but this felt different, personal. The next few hours were a blur of wrenches, wires, and curses under his breath. The sun sank below the hills, casting the shed in shadow, and Marcus switched on his headlamp, its beam cutting through the gloom. The bypass was a beast, rerouting power through a system not built for it was like threading a needle in a gale. He stripped wires, rerouted circuits, tested connections, his fingers numb from the cold. Every few minutes, he thought of Lily, probably reading by flashlight now, and of Vanessa's dare, which he pushed to the back of his mind. It was a distraction he couldn't afford, but it lingered like a stubborn ember. The wind screamed across the Wyoming plains, a relentless howl that battered the Black Hills Energy Co-op's generator shed. Marcus Tate crouched beside the hulking machine, his hands raw from the cold, grease staining his calloused fingers. The generator's rumble was the only thing louder than the storm outside, but it was faltering, its alternator fried from last week's blizzard. Marcus, a single dad with a 10-year-old daughter named Lily waiting back at their barracks apartment, felt the weight of the co-op's survival on his shoulders. The shed's metal walls groaned as he worked, his toolbox a chaotic spread of wrenches and wires. He'd promised Lily a movie night, but the generator had other plans, and time was running out. The door slammed open, letting in a blast of icy air and Vanessa Caldwell, CEO of Black Hills Energy Co-op. Her tailored coat and sharp gaze cut through the shed's gloom like a blade. Behind her trailed 6 suits from the Denver office, their faces pinched against the cold, clutching briefcases like shields. Vanessa's boots clicked on the concrete, each step a declaration of authority. She wasn't just here to check on progress, she was here to make a point in front of her corporate entourage, who were in town for the annual inspection. "Mr. Date," she said, her voice slicing through the generator's hum, "why isn't this fixed?" Her tone was firm, not cruel, but it carried the weight of expectation. The suits shifted, their eyes darting between Marcus and their boss. They were out of place in this gritty, remote outpost, and Vanessa's presence amplified the tension. Marcus stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Alternator's dead, Miss Caldwell. I've got a temporary bypass, but it's not a fix. New parts a week out." He met her gaze, unflinching. He'd dealt with corporate types before, but Vanessa was different. She'd walked the power lines, knew the stakes. Still, her challenge stung. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "A week. We'll freeze by then." "You're the best we've got, Marcus. Fix it now." The suits murmured, sensing a showdown. Vanessa crossed her arms, daring him to argue. This wasn't just about the generator, it was about her proving she could run this place, right in front of her team. Marcus's jaw tightened. "With respect, I'm not a magician. I can patch it, but it's a band-aid. Unless you've got a spare alternator in those briefcases, we're working with what's here." He gestured to the machine, its innards exposed. Vanessa's lips twitched, like she enjoyed the pushback. "Show me," she said, stepping closer, her team fanning out. Her perfumey crisp, expensive ear cut through the oil-soaked air. Marcus didn't like being a spectacle, but he wasn't backing down. Not with Lily waiting, not with the co-op depending on him. He crouched, pointing at the generator. "Alternators here. Converts mechanical energy to electrical. It's burned out. I've rerouted power through the secondary system, but it'll overheat in 48 hours. His voice was steady, but there was an edge here. He wasn't here to impress, he was here to keep the lights on. "And if it overheats?" Vanessa asked, leaning in. "We're dark. No heat, no water. People get creative with campfires." Marcus stood, meeting her gaze. It was the truther out here, power was survival. One suit, a guy with oversized glasses, piped up. "Can't we expedite the shipment?" Marcus cut him off. "Cheyenne's the closest supplier. Weather's slowing things. I've called in favors." He didn't mention staying up half the night coordinating, or promising Lily he'd be home for dinner. Vanessa held his gaze, then said, "Fix it by tonight, Marcus. and I'll kiss you right here in front of my team. The suits laughed nervously, but her face was serious, her eyes locked on his. It was a dare, a spark in a dry field. Marcus felt his face heat, unsure if she was mocking him or testing him. He snorted, "I'd rather have the alternator." The suits chuckled, but Vanessa's smile was sharp. She turned to leave, her team trailing. "Get it done, Mr. Date," she called, and the door slammed shut. Marcus exhaled, diving back into the machine. The next hours were a blur of wires and wrenches, his headlamp cutting through the darkening shed. The bypass was tricky, like threading a needle in a storm. By 8 p.m., he flipped the switch. The generator roared to life, lights flickering on across the co-op. Cheers echoed from the barracks. He'd done it half an hour. He trudged to his apartment, where Lily hugged him tight. "You did it, Dad." Before he could relax, Vanessa appeared, alone, snow dusting her coat. "Nice work," she said, her voice softer. She stepped close, her perfume sharp in the cold air. "I keep my promises." Before he could react, she kissed him, a quick, firm, a handshake with weight. Lily grinned from the couch. Marcus pulled back, flustered. "Didn't think you were serious." Vanessa smirked. "I'm always serious. Good night." She left, the door clicking shut. The co-op woke to a brittle dawn, the generators hum a quiet victory. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, while Lily teased him mercilessly. "Dad, you're famous now," she said, her eyes dancing with mischief. He shook his head, trying to focus on the day ahead, but Vanessa's kiss lingered like a half-remembered dream. It had been a stunt, a power play, but there was something else in her eyes, a respect, maybe, or something deeper he didn't dare name. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, snow dusting the hills like powdered sugar. The co-op was a world unto itself, 30 workers and their families bound by the hum of the generator and the shared fight against the elements. Marcus had grown up here, learned the trade from his dad, who'd kept the same machine running until cancer took him 5 years back. Now it was Marcus's burden, and he carried it for Lily, for the others, for the stubborn pride of knowing he could. Vanessa was still around, her team prepping for their return to Denver. Marcus caught glimpses of her through the morning, reviewing reports in the main office, barking orders over a satellite phone, her presence like a storm front. She moved with purpose, her tailored confidence a stark contrast to the co-op's utilitarian grit. The suits followed her like shadows, scribbling notes, their polished shoes slipping on the icy paths. Marcus wondered what they made of this place, where survival hinged on diesel and duct tape. By noon, he was in the maintenance yard, checking a backup fuel line. The generator's patch was holding, but it was fragile, a house of cards in a windstorm. He knelt beside the line, testing for leaks, when Vanessa's boots crunched on the gravel. She was alone, her coat swapped for a heavy parka, her breath visible in the crisp air. "Generators still running," she said, her tone less sharp than yesterday. "You save our asses." Marcus kept his eyes on the fuel line. "Just doing my job." He wasn't sure what to make of her now. The kiss had been a spark, nothing more, but it had shifted something. He felt her watching him, not as a CEO but as someone trying to understand the man beneath the grease. She stepped closer, her voice low. "You're good at it." "Better than good." "I'm rushing that alternator order. I should be here in 3 days." She paused, like she was choosing her words carefully. "And I meant what I said last night. You're the kind of person this place needs." Marcus straightened, wiping his hands. "Appreciate it. But I'm here for Lily and the folks who rely on this place." He wasn't fishing for praise, it was the truth. The co-op was their lifeline, a fragile thread in a harsh land. Vanessa nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I get it. I've got people depending on me too. This place isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet." For the first time, she sounded like she belonged here, not in a Denver high-rise. "If you ever need anything, Marcus, let me know." "You've earned that." He met her gaze, seeing the woman behind the title. "I'll keep that in mind, Miss Caldwell." For a moment, they were just two people standing in the cold, bound by the same fight to keep this place alive. She lingered, her usual sharpness softened by the moment. "Call me Vanessa," she said, a small concession that felt bigger than it should. And I'm not just talking about work. You're raising a kid out here, keeping this place running. That's not nothing. Marcus shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. Lily's my world. This job's just what I do to keep her safe. He thought of his daughter, her nose buried in a book, her laughter the only thing that made this place feel like home. He didn't talk about it much, but Vanessa's interest felt genuine, not like the corporate platitudes he'd heard before. She nodded, her eyes softening further. I saw her yesterday, you know, in the mess hall, reading some fantasy book thicker than my reports. She's got your fire. Marcus chuckled, a rare sound. She's got her mom's brains, thank God. I'm just the guy who makes sure she's got light to read by. Vanessa smiled, a real one this time, not the sharp-edged grin from the shed. You're more than that, Marcus. Don't sell yourself short. She glanced at the fuel line, then back at him. Walk me through what you're doing here. I want to understand. He hesitated, then crouched again, gesturing to the line. Backup fuel system. If the main tank clogs or freezes, this kicks in. I'm checking for leaks, making sure it's ready if the patch on the generator fails. He explained the valves, the pressure gauges, the small tricks he'd learned over years of keeping the co-op systems alive. Vanessa listened, asking sharp questions, her mind quick and curious. She wasn't just humoring him, she wanted to know. They talked for nearly an hour, the cold forgotten, the yard quiet except for the wind. Marcus found himself opening up, not just about the mechanics but about the co-op, the people, the way it felt to be the one everyone counted on. Vanessa shared glimpses of her world of boardroom battles, investors who didn't understand places like this, the pressure to keep the co-op profitable without losing its soul. It was strange, this moment of connection, two people from different worlds finding common ground in a frozen yard. When her team called her back to the office, she stood, brushing snow from her parka. Keep that generator running, Marcus, she said, her tone light but firm. And maybe we'll talk again before I leave. He nodded, watching her go, her figure cutting through the snow like a beacon. The rest of the day was routine checking systems, logging maintenance, helping a rookie mechanic with a stuck valve, but Vanessa's words stayed with him. She'd seen him, not just as the guy who fixed things, but as someone who mattered. It was a small thing, but out here, small things carried weight. That evening, Marcus sat with Lily in their apartment, the promised movie flickering on their old TV. The generator's hum was a distant comfort, a reminder of what he'd pulled off. Lily leaned against him, half asleep, her book abandoned on the couch. He thought of Vanessa, her challenge, her kiss, her offer of support. She'd be gone tomorrow, back to her world, but she'd left a mark. Not just the kiss, but the recognition, the respect. It wasn't love, not even close, but it was something real, two people seeing each other in the middle of nowhere, under pressure, and finding a spark of understanding. As the movie played, Marcus glanced out the window at the snow-covered hills. The alternator would arrive in a few days, and he'd keep the co-op running, like always. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't alone in the fight. Vanessa's words echoed, "If you ever need anything, let me know." He didn't know if he'd take her up on it, but the offer was enough. For now, he had Lily, the co-op, and the hum of the generator, a fragile, stubborn pulse in the heart of the wilderness.